That will be the issue this evening. That is what we must look at. Where do these variants actually change the meaning of an entire book? Do we believe in the tenacity of the original text? Is it still there? And can we make it a reasonable thing to say that if the New Testament was inspired, that somehow God must work a second kind of miracle where every scribe, even if he's huddled in fear of the Romans in the first few centuries, copying by candlelight on a scrap of papyrus, that somehow he must be transformed into a perfect dictation machine. I submit to you, that was not the standard that even Jesus and the apostles used. Jesus and the apostles, look at the Gospels. What do they quote from? The vast majority of the time they quote from the Greek Septuagint translation of the Old Testament, not the Hebrew Old Testament. And there are times where the New Testament writers actually quote textual variants between the Septuagint and the Hebrew. They didn't follow Dr. Ehrman's standard in regards to these things. The question this evening is, why should we? Many have been those. Tischendorf, just to name one, Dan Wallace, Moises Silva, Gordon Fee, who don't follow this idea that, well, unless there's absolute perfection of copying, then we just don't know. This is a form of radical skepticism that would cause us to reject every other ancient work's accuracy as well. Do we really need to do that? I submit to you, we do not. Thank you very much.
Okay, James, thank you again. Very lively rebuttal. I have a number of questions. Some of them can be answered very quickly, I think. First, in your opening address, you said that there are only 1,500 to 2,000 viable differences among our manuscripts. Where did you get that number?
I said viable. There we go. I said viable and meaningful.
Where did you get that number?
I got that number from a number of studies by Dan Wallace that examined both the issue of viability as far as the number of manuscripts behind a reading, as well as those that actually change the meaning. He has estimated, actually, I went above his number. He's estimated 1,100 to 1,400 at that point. I went above that number just simply so as to be careful.
So this is Dan Wallace's opinion?
I think Dan Wallace is an excellent scholar, and he very regularly has accurate numbers, especially in the material that he presents.
I'm just wondering how somebody knows that it's both viable and important. I mean, for example, you don't think Mark 1:41 is important, or that Hebrews 2:9 are.
I never said that, sir.
Does he think those are important?
We would both say those are important, sir.
So those
He's never said otherwise.
Those are included in the 1,500 to 2,000 number?
They would be, yes, sir.
Okay. It just seems like it's a little odd to come up with a number like that, that it's probably more guesswork than anything, but okay. You say there are 12 manuscripts written within a century of the books of the New Testament. That's news to me. What are these 12 manuscripts?
I'm not sure why it's news to you, sir. Dr. Wallace said the same thing to you at the Greer Herd Forum as well in his opening statement. So I don't understand how that can be news. But if you would look, for example, at Philip Comfort's New Testament text and translation commentary, and again, since Dr. Wallace presented that to you,
I'm asking what the manuscripts are.
A whole list. Well. I can look one up for you.
I know P52.
Yes. There are a number, of course, partly would be the issue of when we date those New Testament manuscripts.
Yes, it would. That is my
for
question.
example, P32 of Titus is quite possibly that early as well. If you want an entire list, I can look it up for you here. It'll take me some time to get to it.
I think the fact that Dan Wallace says something doesn't really make it so.
I didn't say just Dan Wallace. I am reading something other than Dan Wallace in front of us here.
P32 is dated to the year 200.
Well, again, there are many people who believe that the numbers that are assigned in the back of Nestle Aland are extremely conservative.
I see.
And obviously, there are many, for example, T.C. Skeet.
Conservative would mean that they're dated later than normal or earlier. I don't understand.
Being dated not as early as they could be.
Well, yeah, you could date anything to any date you want, but the question is, what grounds do you have?
Actually, that's correct. And are you familiar with T.C. Skeet's discussion of these variants?
Yes, I do know T.C. Skeet, yes.
Okay, well, and you're aware of the fact that on a number of the papyri manuscripts listed in the Nestle Aland text, he would actually give a
Okay, let's
earlier.
talk about T.C. Skeet. When does he date P32?
Well, again, I don't believe that he addressed P32 specifically. I believe that his was a manuscript of John that I was reading about. But are you not aware of the fact
You're
that
not
there are
supposed
variations?
to be asking questions, I think.
You're correct. That's right.
So I think that this number 12 is exceedingly high and is the number 200 within 300 years. And so that's why I was just wondering.
I'm sorry, 200 with 300 years?
You said that there were 200
I
manuscripts.
said 120, sir.
Oh, 120.
Yes.
That's still probably high. Let's go to this business with the Byzantine and the Alexandrian texts, which you said you weren't talking about manuscripts. You were talking about, I believe you said, printed collations. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what a collation is?
Well, I was using the term there to speak of the collection of the readings of a wide family of manuscripts into one representative text, such as you have in the majority text, or you had in that particular instance, the Westcott-Hort text. That's different from a collation of a specific manuscript where you take a base text and then you work through a particular manuscript, providing every variation from that base text. Historically, the TR has normally been used, but thankfully, in recent years, Codex Vaticanus has frequently been used as the base text for collation, things like that. So there's two different ways in which you can use
your
the
latter
term.
definition is what a collation is. The other isn't a collation; it's a printed text, which is quite different. But let's talk about collations for a second. Suppose you compared a collation of a Byzantine manuscript with an Alexandrian manuscript. Do you think you would get a 95% level of agreement?
Of course not. I never even intimated such a
Okay,
thing.
how high would the agreement be?
Well, again, as you pointed out in your Brill compilation, that you need to have about a 70% to assign a manuscript to a particular manuscript family. And so Byzantine texts would fall into the 50%. However, that's not the assertion I was making.
Yes, I understand your assertion, but now you're telling me that if you collate a Byzantine manuscript against an Alexandrian manuscript, there'll be a 50% agreement?
Well, I'm really surprised that you're not following what I'm saying, sir, because obviously, as you know, when you're talking about percentages of variation, you're talking about not the total words in the manuscript and their readings, you're talking about the variations. I was talking about the total words. As I displayed before the people,
Okay.
I was giving a
so
computer
let me repeat
rendering.
my question. When you collate a Byzantine and an Alexandrian manuscript, what is the level of agreement?
On variance or words, sir?
On words.
Words and variance are two different things.
I understand that,
the percentage.
Because, in fact, you're the one who's talking about words as being 95% in agreement. I'm asking you, if you don't collate two texts, but you collate two manuscripts, what is the level of agreement in the words?
The words would, again, a collation, the percentage of